Last time we took a look at the story, and we've determined that they're not similar. So this time, let's look at the characters to see if they were similar or not. The character discussion is one of the more recurring discussions where people use that to prove The Lion King is a ripoff, because the characters look similar. Now, it wouldn't be a problem if not for the fact that all these comparison websites and image galleries are lazy. They don't go into full detail to explain these characters or their backgrounds. All what they do is showing two pictures of characters and the briefest of descriptions, if any was used, and that's it. That would be like if I used these pictures of Ant-Man and Kamen Rider Kuga and claimed Disney ripped off Masked Rider because they did a thumbs up. I even joked about this in a previous video when I said Harry Potter is a Lord of the Rings ripoff because they have a similar cast. Harry is a Frodo ripoff because he's the main hero, Ron is a Sam ripoff because he's the comic relief sidekick, Dumbledore is a Gandalf ripoff because he's the old wizard, Fred and George are Pippin and Merry ripoffs because they are the annoying twin, Dobby is a Gollum ripoff because he's the pale bug-eyed elf creature, the Dementors are Ring Raiders ripoffs because they are shadowy demonic things, and Voldemort is a Sauron ripoff because he's an evil who wants his body and powers back. You find that stupid? You should, because it's the same thing here. But since these franchises are more well known in the West, then of course you won't find the same kind of debate here. Luckily you have someone who actually knows what he is talking about and actually did his research. Considering the cast of Jungle Emperor to be very huge in multiple continuities, not to mention the human characters who don't have counterparts in The Lion King, we will focus only on those who have clear counterparts between the two and contain it within the 60s shows and the first Lion King movie. While we didn't go through their story in the last video, let's take a look at their characteristics. Simba, the son of Mufasa, was a lion cub who had dreams of being a king and doing whatever he wants under his authority without anyone to control him. Basically, he was going to be what Scar would end up like, and that's why royalties don't rule without further control over them. But his childish dreams came to a halt when his father died and ran away until he met Timon and Pumbaa, who taught him to not give a care in the world and just fool around in their little heaven because they don't have any responsibilities to carry. And for years, he lived a lazy life without thinking about his home or to go back there someday. That until his childhood friend Nala found him and gave him a little update on the situation at home, but he declined her offer because he was afraid to face his troubles and admits to a crime he believes to have committed. It was until he met Rafiki, who guided him to the ghost of his father, who gave him a reminder on who he is supposed to be, that he had decided to take this matter at hand and fight his way to reclaim the throne and clear his name. And his story ends by becoming the new king. Leo, aka Kimba, the son of Panja, was born and lived as an orphan. His name in the first series dub was just a name change due to a trademark issues, but in the second series, Leo the Lion, it was retconned to be a nickname meaning coward given by his father.
And in a sense, I was that way too. I was the little white cub that didn't want to fight. My name was Little Coward, or in the language of animals, Kimba.
Another reason to not like this dub. Leo didn't know his father, and his mother didn't live long after his birth, and the last thing she told him is to go back to Africa and rule it as the king instead of living in a cage to be a show for humans. So unlike Simba, who dreamt of being a king and fantasized about it, and then ignoring it for a life without responsibility as a means of escapism, Leo was thrusted with this responsibility of rulership since he was born. In the 65 anime, he chose to leave on his free will, but in the manga, his mother forced him against his will to do so. Leo's time in France was changed from how it was in the manga, and it's a bit inconsistent between episodes. In episode 44, as in the time when episode's quality was going down, instead of getting saved by Kenichi from his classmates, Leo lived a while with him and his uncle after saving them from bank burglars, but he wasn't fully trusting them. It didn't help that he was sold to the zoo without their notice and assumed that they were bad like all humans and they were just acting nice to sell him and get money. But he changed his mind after he was saved by Kenichi from a falling tower. And to thank them in his special way, He freed all animals in the zoo and brought them to the hotel they were staying at. But Kenichi wasn't angry at him, and he understood that Leo needs to go back to where he belongs. But before that, in episode 5, we see that he stayed with them for a longer time and didn't go back to the jungle immediately. And in Leo the Lion, his backstory was retconned to match the manga with a bit of him getting used to human culture. Also with his pants. But since the anime didn't include the Moonlight Stone plot, there was no fake expedition, and since Kenichi was changed to an adult, he didn't grow up living in the jungle like his manga counterpart. In the anime, he was stranded in the jungle with Mari, but we don't see how it happened.
If I had known this was going to happen, I would never have asked you to join my hunting expedition. But how could I have known our plane would crash and that we'd be separated from the others?
Plus, this time, he chose to stay with Leo even after giving him the chance to leave. Back to Leo. His impression to the jungle life differs between the manga and anime. In the manga, he was very disgusted by the jungle life and the savagery he was witnessing, and even awakening his instinct as a predator but not realizing what it was. In addition, his first encounter with Boo Boo ended up with him walking in shame for not having the guts to be a real lion. That until the animals paid him a visit and after a ploy from Tommy and Coco, asked him to be the new king and restore Panja's jungle to its former glory. In the anime, however, despite showing some lack of understanding to the jungle, he wasn't as cowardly or whiny as the manga counterpart, and he still stood his ground against Dick and Bo when they were going to eat Tommy. Either way, Leo has decided to take his responsibility by ruling the jungle, and from then on, his life was nothing but ruling the jungle and building it to be for both animals and humans. Now, to compare them as kings would be unfair since we haven't seen Simba act as one and therefore have no idea how he rules his kingdom. Leo, on the other hand, the vast of his story is ruling the jungle and his obstacles are rulership related. With Simba, the Lion King ended with him before we get to see how he rules, and Simba's pride and the Lion God are focused on his offspring, leaving him out of the focus with no idea of his leadership outside how he handles the Outlanders situation, which as we all know didn't end up in his favor and needed the combined effort of both his daughter and the son of his enemy to end the conflict. Therefore, if you would take that as an idea of his leadership skills, he didn't do a good job. He was blindly prejudiced against the Outlanders, basing it on his experience with Scar, which led to Kiara hating him and exile herself to be with Kubo. And the Lion God, he was also prejudiced against Kion's friends, believing it at first that they weren't real gods because they were not lions.
Kion, the Lion Guard has always been made of lions. Do you really think a lion guard with only one lion can protect the Pride Lands? Please, Kion, there are plenty of good lions for the guard.
See? This guy's an asshole.
Leo, on the other hand, didn't hate anyone. His priority was to be friends with everyone no matter what creature they were. And when there's a new threat, he usually tries to reason with them to avoid any misunderstandings or pointless violence. But he will fight if he had to protect the innocents. But despite Leo being a respected leader, there's one problem. He was still a naive child at heart. Leo spent the majority of his life being an idealistic and somewhat naive lion who thought everyone will accept what he wants to bring or simply become friends without a second thought, only to be left confused on why they refuse change. He thought if he was nice, then he could befriend anyone, and even as an adult, he is still unsure why things don't go the way he wants. Him being a child in an adult's body is more apparent in the manga, as he was drawn with his child face and being happy for the most part, but his adult self in the anime is portrayed to be more serious and wiser. One noticeable detail in the manga that was lost in animated adaptations that I mentioned in the previous part is Leo wearing pants. That was a symbol of his attachment to the pacifist and civilized human world and his inability to let go of that lifestyle. And he decided to let go of that and accept that he is a lion, not a human, when he got rid of them to show his change from a city animal to a wild beast. The other problem Leo had with his life? He didn't have a parent to raise him. Sure, he had other characters acting as his father, both humans and animals, but none of them were his real father. None of them were lions to teach him or guide him on how lions and kings should act. Even the lions who bonded with him out of mutual respect weren't his parents. And now that I think about it, here's a sad realization. Leo never had a decent childhood. At least Simba had the chance to grow up with nice childhood memories. He had his parents, he had friends to play with, he got to be a child. But Leo never had that pleasure. Right off the bat, his parents died at his birth, he was away from home for a good number of years, and when he came back, he had the responsibility of ruling a merciless world that can kill him any day. Going back to Leo and him growing up without a power parent, that ended up leaving him clueless many times on how to act in different situations, as a ruler, a lion, and a parent. And when he became a father, it's more obvious. And Leo is an overly harsh father when he tries to teach his son Rooney. He'd force his son in many ordeals to make him stronger, and he gets physical when he punishes him.
You're a bad cub.
Leo! Daddy didn't mean to hurt you, sweetheart. 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 Daddy didn't mean to hurt you, sweetheart.
Say it again. Say it to my fucking face.
Daddy didn't mean to hurt you, sweetheart.
Wow, Bootleg Mufasa. You sure do suck, and I wish I never invited you over.
To him, this is normal as it's not even close to what he went through as a kid, but he doesn't realize that it's too much to his son or anyone else. Compare that to Simba, who was overprotective to his daughter Kiara. Simba's parenthood methods were nicer and softer than Leo's, if not a little bit overbearing by not letting Kiara on her own without protection, both young and old. Two kings, but each of them rules differently. Childhood friends and the love interests of our future kings. How similar are they? Nala is Simba's childhood friend from the same pride. Insert incest joke here. And we could assume they knew each other since they were younger. And according to Zazu, they were meant to be engaged in an arranged marriage as part of their traditions. Leia, or Raya, depending on what pronunciation you use, aka Kitty, is a lioness cub who befriended Leo after meeting him following his return to the jungle after years of absence, and she remained his loyal friend and then grew up to be his love interest and wife. In the manga, they first met after saving her from capture by hunters.
I'm called Kitty. You're not from this part of the jungle, are you, Kitty? No, my home is downriver. I used to live there with my mother and father until the hunters came. You're all alone now in the world, you mean? Yes, except for my uncle who lives up in the mountains. I was on my way there to visit him when Claw stopped me. I better go now.
In the 65 anime, not only she was the niece of King Speckle Rex, thus putting her in an awkward position on who she should be loyal to, but she is also a constant target for Boo Boo's creepy affection, though the last part is taken from the manga. Personality-wise, Nala was more of a tomboy who wouldn't hesitate to get rough with Simba, which makes sense when you remember lionesses are the ones who do most of the hunting both in movie and real life, and she was strong enough to actually live and grow in a period of famine, which didn't make her any less strong. Leia was more feminine and girly and didn't display a lot of violence in her life, but that wouldn't stop her from helping Leo when he needs help by any means necessary. Sadly though, I can't say Leia was that developed of a character. She remains mostly bland and didn't have much growth, and the fact that she was ignored after she became a mother, and even Ruki was ignored in favor of her brother, doesn't help her case. Her 89 version on the other hand does show some development, most significantly when she shows her disappointment in Leo's actions when he let his paranoia take over his mind. And the less we say about her original fate, the better. This is one of the biggest points detractors use to prove their case. Rafiki the baboon? Or mandrill? Seriously, what is Rafiki supposed to be? Glad the remake is fixing that issue. And Mandy, aka Daniel Baboon, the mandrill. God, this is confusing. Those two characters are seen to have many things in common. Mainly being old colorful monkeys who support our main lion, but that's as far as their similarities. Rafiki is a shaman of the savannah. He's a spiritual monkey who offers wisdom and talks to all spirits and a friend to the main pride and accompanied them for generations. But unlike Mandy, he didn't have a close relationship with Simba, as shown in the movie how Simba didn't know who Rafiki was, indicating that they never met for all of Simba's childhood. Mandy, on the other hand, is one of Leo's closest friends and acts as his surrogate father to guide him through his life and pay his respects to his late father. It should be noted that Mandy is an anime original character and didn't appear in the manga. In the 1989 adaptation, the role of Leo's surrogate father was given to Uncle Kurosagi the Black Rhino and Marody the Barbary Lion, but he had a small non-speaking cameo in one episode. In the 1997 movie and 2000 special, he is replaced by a bearded green monkey named Bozara, who plays the same role, making you wonder why they didn't just use Mandy as he was. Since he's Leo's father figure, that makes him the closest animal to him and the first one to seek guidance from. So when he accidentally injured him in a fit of rage in episode 17, Devil's Falls, he was completely devastated that he ran away, leaving his kingdom out of guilt.
Leo, that's enough! You have no right to strike an animal like that!
Out of my way!
You killed Mandy!
He's not breathing.
I didn't. I couldn't have done that. It was an accident. Oh, Mandy. It was an accident.
Leo, I warned you you had no right to strike another animal.
Which kinda mirrors Simba's ordeal, except here Leo knows what he did and Mandy was alive by the end, and all of this was ignored the next episode. Rafiki and Mandy's personalities are also the opposite. While Rafiki is wacky and loves to fool other animals as means to teach them lessons in an indirect way, Mandy is more serious and a no-nonsense kind of animal and often would play the straight man opposing other animals. And in his spare time, he runs the Jungle Diner, a restaurant built by Leo's suggestion dedicated to feed hungry animals in times of need. Now to the bird characters. In The Lion King, we have Zazu, the hornbill, and in Jungle Emperor, we have Coco the parrot, aka Polly Cracker. The things they have in common? Being birds. That's pretty it. Zazu is the personal messenger of the royal family and he answers directly to the king. Coco is a former hotel pet and it's there where he learned the human language which helped Leo when needed. He is officially the second animal Leo befriended from the jungle and remains by his side. Coco's ability to mimic voices also helped Leo to overcome his weakness when he disguised himself as Panja. And while he relays the jungle news to Leo, that's not his official duty in the same way as Zazu. Personality-wise, they're also different. Zazu is more like your traditional British butler who doesn't joke around and remains stern and stoic while showing some sarcasm to what he doesn't like. Coco is more open in what he thinks and loud and one of the rudest characters in the entire franchise for not holding back on what he says to anyone even if it puts him in trouble. So while he doesn't match Zazu's personality, he is closer to Timon in that part, as Timon is a wisecracker who thinks highly of himself and jokes about everything, in addition to being a comedic duo with another larger and friendly animal. But unlike Coco, Timon knows when he gets out of line and he uses his humor to ease up the situation. The big-hearted guys next to the egotistical small guys. Pumbaa the warthog from The Lion King, the animal no one could get close to thanks to his smell, and Tommy, aka Bucky, the grand gazelle from Jungle Emperor, is the jungle's lovable coward but loyal friend. Pumbaa is the other half of the Timon and Pumbaa duo. If Timon was the brains, Pumbaa is the heart. Pumbaa was a lonely warthog who had no friends until he met Timon, and together they took the task of raising and taking care of Simba when he was alone and away from his home. Tommy is the first animal to befriend Leo in Africa. In the manga, he was the first to personally welcome his return, while in the other adaptations, he was saved by him from other predators, thus became his friend to return the favor. Later on, he gets assigned to be the jungle's Minister of Agriculture with the task of taking care of the fields that feeds the animals for emergency times, as well as being one of the teachers at school. One thing that is absent from the 65 anime is his signature hat. The hat has different origins, but it's officially part of his looks and sets him apart from the other gazelles. The most famous attribute about Tommy is his cowardness. Despite being Leo's friend, he gets cold hooves rather easily. Despite that, He's not the kind who abandons his friend to save his own skin. The most impressive example I can show is from the 89 adaptation, when he, of all animals, saves Leo from Boo Boo. Just watch. Pumbaa is also the same. He's not as cowardly as Tommy, but mess with his friends, or call him a pig, and he will charge at you head on. But unlike Pumbaa, who barely argues with Timon and allows him to take credit for his ideas, Tommy is constantly bickering with Coco. Despite them being friends, they spend most of their days arguing over the silliest things and will fight for something he believes in. Most notably in episode 39 titled Running Wild, when it was just him against a large herd of antelopes raiding on the farms. As the Minister of Agriculture, it is his responsibility to protect them for the hungry animals, and nothing will stop him from doing his duty.
They're smashing our cabbages! No, you're making me angry!
Except maybe large numbers. He might be a coward and ignorant on many things, but he knows stupid when he sees it and will stand to what he believes. One character is often used as a comparison is Beller, aka Gargoyle, a warthog from episode 18, The Runaway, who thought no one liked him because he was ugly looking, and his mother disowned him for being a coward.
Tell me why you don't like me.
'Cause you're handsome.
Handsome?
Look at yourself. You're the handsomest animal in the jungle. And look at me. I'm ugly. I ran away so my mother'd never have to see my ugly face again.
Gargoyle, good deeds are more important than good looks.
I tried to be good, but what good did it do?
Gargoyle!
Oh, Mother.
Don't you call me Mother. You're no son of mine.
You're ashamed of me, aren't you?
Yes, I am, but not for the reasons you think. I'm ashamed of you because you're a coward who wants to hide his head in a hole.
I'm not a coward, Mother. I'm just ugly.
She's right, you know.
Poor Gargoyle. Now he's lost his chance to win the medal.
But I doubt that out of all episodes they'd pick this one random episode with a random one-off character that didn't appear in any main role again when Tommy is the more prominent character. Now to the fathers of our kings. Mufasa is the Lion King. He is the freed and respected ruler of Pride Land, and it's his responsibility to keep the circle of life in balance. Panja, aka Caesar, is the white demon of the jungle. He is the source of nightmares to all hunters and poachers who dare to disturb his kingdom with a long list of enemies who want him dead. Now everybody knows this story. Mufasa was killed by his brother Scar to take over the rulership. But Panja's death is different. He wasn't killed by a jealous brother or another lion. He was killed by poachers in a trap using his wife. And in his last breath, he named his yet unborn kid, Leo, or Kimba, depending on which version you're watching.
That was Caesar. He may be in trouble and need my help. Caesar? Caesar? Caesar! Stay away! Stay away! Caesar! No! Stay away!
Don't cry, Snowine. Perhaps when you have our child, it will be a boy, and you can call it Kimba. Kimba, son of Caesar.
Oh.
characters were known as wise leaders, especially with Mufasa, who had the chance to be a father and teach his kid a thing or two about life. But with Panja's death, he couldn't do the same to his son, and thus, everything known about his past and his way of life is told by other animals who lived beside him. All what Leo had was his skin, which he keeps around and sleeps with, and even talks to him as if he's alive. Which is kind of disturbing if you think about it. This is something Norman Bates would do. The famous scene of Mufasa's spirit in the clouds does have a similar one in Jungle Emperor, but no, it's not this scene. We'll leave that for another topic. What happens in Jungle Emperor is Panja visiting Leo in his dreams. In the manga, it was during the time when Leo was captured, and it's there where he accepts his true self as the wild lion. In the 65 anime, during episode 22, Panja makes a quick visit to Leo to encourage him in his quest to save a character from his illness.
Kimba, Pop Wooly grows weaker and weaker from the fever. Are you going to sit by and do nothing, son? Since I can no longer help the animals of the jungle, you must take over, Kimba.
Yes, Father, I will.
Do it for old Pop Wooly.
There was also the scene when the jungle animals discussed as Panja using Coco to speak to Leo to encourage him when he was down, but I think we shouldn't count this moment since it wasn't really Panja who appears here.
Oh.
You may approach, but not too close.
All right, but please tell me who you are and why you were calling Kimba.
I'm your father's spirit.
Great Caesar's ghost? I've never believed in ghosts. But you seem real.
How could you doubt it? Of course I'm real. And I've come back because I think you need help.
You knew?
You were right, my boy. Killing is always wrong.
How am I doing?
Fine, Pauline. Now tell him to have courage, no matter what.
You must have courage, Kimba, no matter what happens.
Despite the anime portraying him as a noble character, the original Panja was a prejudiced jerk who hated domesticated animals, believing they were not true animals, and he would kill them and feed them to other carnivores instead of freeing them like what he does to wild animals. This point was alluded to when Samson the buffalo offered Leo some mules as tribute because Panja banned that act and Samson wanted Leo to bring this tradition back.
Why are you hesitating? Just go ahead and get rid of these traitors. Show me what a great leader you are, Kimba. Even though I admired your father, he had one great fault. He had a silly notion about being kind to all animals, even the weak man-tamed traitors. But now you can bring back the law of the jungle.
But Leo was not having any of this, and he chose to let the mules free, thus going against the traditions like his father.
That's why what you did, Samson, was doubly wrong.
What do you mean I did wrong? Why, even your father used to steal animals from the village.
But he did it to set them free in the jungle, not to prepare them for a feast as you wanted to.
Oh, yeah?
Kimba, we would like to bid you goodbye, because we've made up our minds to go back to the village. We appreciate your help, but I guess we've been living among human beings much too long, sleeping in barns and having our meals provided. Besides, if we go back, maybe the villagers won't attack you anymore. So goodbye and thanks, Kimba. You make a wonderful prince.
Mufasa's wisdom, on the other hand, was still consistent and even gives some encouraging words to his grandson. And now we move to the mothers. As the mate of Mufasa, Sarabi is the second most respected animal in Pride Land and the leader of the Pride's hunters. She is kind and wise, and even when she is surrounded by hungry hyenas, she doesn't show any fear and continues to walk, not showing any signs of weaknesses. It's unknown if she died in between the Lion King and Simba's pride, but at least she was available to be Simba's mother in both childhood and old age. Eliza, aka Snowing, is Panja's mate and the mother of Leo. She was caught by poachers in order to lure Panja in to kill him, and they succeeded. After that, she was sold off to be a display in London Zoo, but not realizing that she was pregnant. And during the trip, she gave birth to Leo. But unfortunately, she couldn't stay with him, and so she orders her freshly born son the task to go back to Africa where he belongs, instead of spending the rest of his life in a cage with her. And whether it was fate or not, the ship that carried her sank in a storm with everyone else but Leo. And that's it with her. The last thing we see of her is her face in the stars, but nothing else to add here. She died, and nothing more was said about her for the rest of the series. The end. Now that we're done with our heroes, let's talk about the villains. Now this is another case of two characters looking suspiciously similar but quite different from each other. In The Lion King, Scar is Mufasa's jealous brother who killed him to rule over Pride Land and manipulated Simba in thinking he was the killer and forced him to run away from Pride Land, only to send his hyenas after him who failed to tell him he was alive this whole time. As the king, he was a failure as his reign brought the land to waste and died when the hyenas decided to end their partnership following his questionable statements. Boo, aka Claw, on the other hand, was just some rogue lion, officially a Barbary lion, who had a rivalry with Panja and lost his eye in a battle and developed a grudge over him. In all versions, he is blind in the left eye. The only exception to that is the 89th series that gave him a scar instead of simply being blind. It's thanks to this condition where he got nicknames such as the One-Eyed Lion, the One-Eyed Loser, and the One-Eyed Bully, etc. On the other hand, Scar gets to keep both of his eyes. Boo is not Leo's uncle. Let's make this clear. He is not Leo's uncle. He is not in any way or form related to him as some sites want you to believe. He is just a random lion out of many lions living in Africa, and the series is filled with other lions who want a piece of Leo. Also, unlike Scar, he did not kill Panja. As much as he wanted to, Panja's demise was by the poachers and Boo had nothing to do with it. He just took that opportunity to take control of the kingless jungle until the return of Leo to Africa, where we meet him for the first time. Boo? Man, is this name silly. It means deaf in Swahili, so it's the real world, but it doesn't match his appearance as he's one-eyed and not deaf. Boo is like the Shredder of the franchise. Despite portraying him as the main baddie and Leo's arch-nemesis, he was a very minor character in the manga with only 4 appearances. The first time is when he hears the news about Leo, the second is when he first meets Leo, the third was a skirmish that ended up in his defeat and accepting Leo's hospitality, and the fourth when they fought to death over Leia, resulting in Boo dying a pathetic death after hitting his head and blinded his right eye, only to be consumed by ants and never mentioned again. Seriously, that's all what Boo does in the entire manga. In the animated adaptations, minus Leo the Lion, 1997 movie and the 2009 movie, his role was expanded to be the main villain, and depending on the writer, he's either one of the most ruthless and most cunning characters in the series who can easily manipulate the situation to his favor, or a Skeletor-level loser who can't think of a plan without the help of his minions.
What?
During Leo's absence, Boo would take control of the jungle when no one is strong enough to challenge him, and he takes his job seriously. Scar, on the other hand, was just lazing around and blames everything on the other animals when nothing goes as planned. Boo's powers are also depending on the writers, as sometimes he's so strong he can take on every animal in the jungle on his own, and other times he is bested by a kid half his size. Though to be fair, Leo is already super strong on his own if he can take on elephant bulls by himself. But in the 89 version, he was a bigger threat as the power scaling was more realistic and logically, he would be much stronger than a tiny cub, and in every confrontation, something would come and end the fight before he finishes him off. Boo is also infamous for being a creepy pedo.
I'm Claw.
Are you talking to me?
That's right. You're a pretty young thing, aren't you? I like you. How would you like to be my queen when you get a little older?
Be your queen?
Yes.
I don't think so, but it's very nice of you to ask.
All right. Take care of her, boys.
Claw, I really don't understand what's going on.
You will.
FBI, open up!
You're a great king, Claw.
Kitty.
Do you still want to have me as your queen?
Mm-hmm.
I'd be very happy to accept your proposal, Your Majesty, and share your throne with you. And as a wedding present, all I ask of you is your promise not to hurt any of the other animals.
Your Majesty, this is a trap.
The only reason she's willing to be your queen is so that she can protect her precious friends.
Quiet! I make all the decisions around here. Nobody's going to tell me how to rule my jungle. And that goes for every one of you, understand? Let's go!
Thankfully, every other iteration decided to ignore that part and focus mainly on making him a villain without these questionable things, even though it worked for Leo's advantage when he defeated an enemy that was too strong for Leo once he found out that he hurt Leo in the progress, which was not part of his plan.
Kimba and Kitty were thrown all over the place. It was gorgeous, Claw.
What a beautiful picture, yeah. Kimba and Kitty being thrown on the ground. You mean Kitty fought him?
Yeah, fought him.
Yeah, fought him.
And she lost?
She didn't have a chance.
Not a prayer.
I'll teach Tusker to throw my girl on the ground. I'll teach him. Hold on, Kitty! Fighting Kitty wasn't part of the deal we made, Tusker.
Huh?
Boo Boo's last appearance in the 65 series was in episode 37, and the last thing we ever see of him is getting washed away by the river, but still alive.
That'll hold him.
In the 89 series, on the other hand, he sacrifices himself to save Leo's life in the jungle's final hours against the hunters, admitting his defeat against him. He lives, but that is one big character development coming from a dirty coward like him. In the Hon OG short, which counts as his final appearance ever, he lost his battle against Leo after getting his right eye scratched and temporarily blinded, but lives in hopes of challenging him again. Interestingly enough, the concept of Boo Boo being a rogue lion who rivaled Panja is similar to the original concept of the Lion King when Scar wasn't Mufasa's brother and led his own pride and hyenas against him until they decided to make them brothers to add more family drama. Another thing I do find interesting is Boo Boo being redesigned later to resemble Scar with a leaner body and longer snout as well. Is Tezuka Studio ripping off Disney with this? Eh? And despite Boo being advertised as the main villain, he is not the only one in the franchise, as there are many other villains out there ranging from other lions who rival Panja in kingship like Speckle Rex and the Blue Lion, to other animals who just want to cause trouble like Boss Rhino and Pazzo the Elephant. But in the end, Boo Boo is the more iconic one. The hyenas are the second famous villains of the franchise. They were so popular, not only they had their own shorts in the Timon and Pumbaa show, but also were the main villains in The Lion King 1.5. The hyenas were more of chaotic evil. They were evil, but didn't follow someone else's command. They didn't follow Scar's orders until they were promised endless food supply, which was the downfall of Prideland, as they ate everything in sight down to the bones and caused a chaos in the circle of life. And it wasn't until Scar throwing all the blame on them that they decided to end their deal and go against him, and they were never seen again. Dick and Bo, aka Tom and Tab, on the other hand, are Boo Boo's loyal minions and follow his command willingly. Dick is the smart one, and Bo is the dumb one. I don't like these guys. They're like Bulk and Skull if they were evil, and it's funny to see their competence vary from one episode to another. Their loyalty to Boo Boo is also noted, as they remain loyal to him even when they appear like they turned a new leaf. As soon as Boo Boo returns, they go back to his side even without demanding them, unlike the hyenas of The Lion King who grew doubtful of Scar's leadership and eventually betrayed him.
Poor Turtle, his city was destroyed after all.
Poor Turtle. He saved our lives.
But lost his home.
Yeah.
Bye, Turtle!
Bye, Turtle! Bye! So long.
Thanks.
You gonna follow Kimba now instead of that bad claw?
Oh no! We almost forgot!
Come on!
I was hoping they'd change.
They never learn, do they?
Dick and Bo did not appear in the manga. They were created exclusively for the 65 anime adaptation, and they never appeared in other versions. But in the 89 anime, we see two hyenas in this shot, which I assume is a nod to them. And in the 89 version, they were replaced by a vulture named Vulture. Yeah, we don't know his name. In the manga and most adaptations, Boo Boo's main partner is Toto, the Black Panther, aka Cassius. Toto was Boo Boo's main right-hand man and the most competent one. He was even promoted to the main animal villain in the alternate continuity 2009 movie. And that's all for the characters here. Of course, there are way more characters I didn't go through in both Jungle Emperor and The Lion King spin-offs, like comparing Rooney and Rukio to Kiara and Kion, and Zira, but as stated, we are focusing mainly on the 65 and 66 anime and the original Lion King movie. Come back next time, when we take a look at scenes that many claims were copied and put some context behind them.